Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always been tall for my age. At 14, I often get mistaken for someone much older, which usually isn't a problem. I actually like that. It helps me get more babysitting jobs. Parents tend to trust me more when I look mature. I make good money watching kids in my neighborhood, and I'm saving up for college already. My cousin's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to get them something special. They're really into those collectible action figures, so I figured Walmart would be a good place to look. I threw on my favorite blue t-shirt and headed to the store after finishing my homework. I was browsing through the toys section, looking at different figures and trying to find the perfect one when I heard someone clearing their throat behind me. I ignored it at first, focused on reading the back of a package. The woman behind me asked if I could help her, addressing me as Miss. When I looked around and asked if she was talking to me, she confirmed and asked me where the granola bars were. I politely explained that I didn't work there and suggested she check the grocery section. Her face suddenly twisted with anger. She insisted that I clearly worked there and demanded to know where the granola bars were. I tried again to explain as politely as possible that I didn't work there and suggested she find an actual employee. Her face turned bright red as she demanded the granola bars immediately. When I asked her not to shout and repeated that I didn't work there, she started screaming about wanting the granola bars right now. I noticed a man and a young kid nearby, clearly embarrassed, trying to pretend they didn't know her. I took a deep breath and kept my voice firm but not yelling. I explained once again that I didn't work there, offered to help her find an employee, and asked her to calm down. She responded by screaming for a manager, threatening to get me fired. I was tempted to say something sarcastic, but instead, I just told her one last time to leave me alone since I didn't work there. A man in a store uniform approached us, probably drawn by all the yelling. The woman immediately asked if he was the manager. When he confirmed and asked what was happening, she complained about me, claiming I was an employee who refused to help her find granola bars and had been rude. The manager quickly told her that he knew I didn't work there, explaining that he knew all his employees by face and name. I added that I was only 14 and couldn't legally work. The woman accused me of lying, which prompted the manager to ask her to leave for disturbing the peace. She responded by threatening to call the police, which I encouraged her to do. A few minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. The first officer announced they'd received a call about harassment and assault, then instructed his partner to help question everyone. The first officer took me aside to another aisle, where I explained everything that happened. From where we stood, I could hear the woman telling the second officer a completely different story. She claimed that I, as an employee, had not only been rude to her, but had actually slapped her across the face when she asked for a manager. The manager and the embarrassed man and child all confirmed my version of events. When the first officer requested to see the security footage, the manager took them to check the cameras while we waited. When they came back, the woman's face had gone pale. The first officer told her that she was under arrest for lying to an officer and misuse of emergency services. I kept my face neutral as they put her in handcuffs. Before leaving, the officer mentioned that this wasn't their first report about her. I later found out she got fined $2,500 and sentenced to 30 days in jail for her history of similar incidents. The store banned her for life, though they allowed her family to keep shopping there. She now has to drive 2 hours to the next nearest Walmart, fighting through constant traffic jams. Maybe next time she'll think twice before harassing teenagers and lying to the police. I did end up finding the perfect action figure for my cousin, by the way. A nice employee helped me locate it after all the drama was over. My cousin loved it, and now this story has become a favorite at family gatherings. Back in 7th grade, I was known as one of the top students in my pre-algebra class. The teacher was pretty laid back and let us work in groups of 4 for homework, which was great because my 2 friends and I would finish quickly and spend the rest of the time playing card games. Everything was going smoothly until this kid with terrible grades decided to join our group halfway through the year. At first, he seemed genuinely interested in learning. He approached us politely, explaining that he was struggling with the material and asked if he could join our group. We agreed to help him understand the concepts. For the next few months, we actually helped him, and his grades started improving. He even got a Most Improved Student award, which should have made us feel good. But there was more to the story. During tests, we had to sit separately, but there weren't assigned seats. This kid always managed to position himself between me and my friends. I didn't think much of it until one day I caught him red-handed. After finishing my test early, I got up to turn it in. When I returned to my seat, I saw him copying answers from my friend's paper. That's when it hit me. We'd been played. He wasn't interested in learning, he just wanted easy access to answers. I gathered my friends later and told them about what I'd witnessed. They were shocked to learn about the cheating and couldn't believe how he'd manipulated us. We all agreed that something needed to be done about it. We came up with a plan. Instead of teaching him during homework time, we just let him copy our work. This gave us back our free time to play cards. And more importantly, we knew he wasn't learning anything. We were just waiting for the final exam. On the day of the final, I arrived early and strategically left an open seat to my right. My friend sat to my left. When the cheater walked in, he expressed relief at seeing the empty seat next to me and quickly claimed it. The final exam was twice as long as our regular tests. I noticed him peeking at my paper right away. To confirm my suspicion, I skipped a question and moved to the next page. Sure enough, he did the same thing seconds later. That's when I put my plan into action. I kept a separate sheet where I wrote down the correct answers, but on my actual test, I deliberately marked wrong answers. The cheater copied everything. I made sure to skip some questions randomly to make it less obvious and give myself a reason to take longer. When he finished, he got up with this smug look on his face and left. I quickly erased all the wrong answers and filled in the correct ones from my sheet. I was the last one to turn in my test. The teacher noticed something was off and asked why I'd taken so long when I usually finished first. I explained everything to him, even predicting that the cheater would get most questions wrong, especially after number 11. The teacher took me to the teacher's lounge where they had the grading machine. My test scored 97%. The cheater, a whopping 7%. The teacher was shocked and thanked me for bringing this to his attention, saying he'd need to discuss this with the principal. The aftermath was better than we expected. The school made him retake all his final exams, and it turned out he'd been cheating in other classes too. He failed multiple tests and didn't pass 7th grade. He had to go to summer school, but apparently that didn't go well either. The next year when I asked my math teacher about him, he simply told me that the student wouldn't be returning to the school. Later, I found out his family's house was up for sale, and we never saw or heard from him again. I was having the worst possible day. The summer heat was unbearable, and I had spent my entire morning running errands around the city. My car decided to break down the previous day, so I had to rely on public transportation, which meant more walking in the scorching sun than I would have liked. By the time I reached the office building for my important client meeting, I was exhausted, sweaty, and probably looking less than professional. But I didn't have a choice. This meeting could mean a big promotion at work, and I wasn't going to let a broken car and bad weather ruin my chances. I squeezed my way into the crowded elevator, trying to make myself as small as possible. That's when I first encountered her, Karen. She stood there in her expensive suit and perfect blonde bob, looking like she owned the place. The moment I stepped in, she turned her nose up at me and demanded that I get off the elevator, claiming we were already over the weight limit. The elevator was packed with about 10 other people, and somehow I was the problem. I told her she must be mistaken, as there was no way we were over the weight limit. Karen just pointed at me and repeated her demand for me to get off, emphasizing each word like she was talking to a child. Everyone else in the elevator shifted uncomfortably, trying to avoid eye contact. I wasn't about to let this woman bully me, especially not today. I stood my ground and told her I wasn't going anywhere, suggesting that she needed to learn some manners and respect other people's boundaries. Karen scoffed and made a snide comment about how I must be jealous because I could never afford clothes like hers. I was about to lose my cool when an elderly gentleman stepped in to mediate. He tried to calm the situation down by suggesting that we shouldn't argue in such a cramped space, reminding everyone that we were all just trying to get to our destinations. His intervention was kind, but Karen wasn't done with her tirade. I repeated that I wasn't leaving and told her I didn't care about her clothes, insisting that she needed to learn some respect for other people. Karen sneered and asked how she could possibly be expected to show respect to a nobody like me. The tension in the elevator was palpable. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but before I could respond, something unexpected happened. A young man who had been quietly standing at the back of the elevator suddenly moved forward. Without saying a word, he planted his foot on Karen's backside and pushed her out of the elevator. The doors closed behind her as she stumbled into the lobby, and the entire elevator erupted in cheers and laughter. The young man casually mentioned that he couldn't stand to see her treating people like that. The rest of the elevator ride was filled with congratulations from the other passengers. The elderly gentleman patted my shoulder approvingly. When I got to my floor, I was still grinning from what had happened. The meeting went by in a blur. I was too pumped up on adrenaline to focus properly. Later, when I was heading back down, I ran into Karen again. She was standing by the elevator, looking even more sour than before. She spitefully told me she hoped I was happy, complaining that I had caused a scene and made her late for her appointment. I responded by suggesting that maybe next time she'd think twice before trying to bully strangers. The young man from earlier suddenly appeared behind me and asked Karen if she was still here, offering another push if she needed it. Karen's face turned bright red, and she stormed off toward the stairs. Everyone in the elevator burst out laughing again. The young man turned out to work in the same building. We ended up grabbing coffee together after work, and now we meet regularly to laugh about the incident that brought us together. And I still see Karen sometimes in the building. These days, she takes the stairs. I need to get this off my chest because I'm still processing how everything unfolded. This is about how my dad's girlfriend tried to make my life harder, but it completely backfired on her. Some context: my mom passed away when I was 10, and being from a huge family, a lot of responsibility fell on us kids. My dad was old school, the type who believed men worked and women handled everything else. So guess who inherited all the women's work after mom died? Us kids. By age 11, I was cooking dinner for 8 to 10 people regularly. I had chores coming out of my ears, but honestly, it wasn't terrible. Sure, I felt sorry for myself sometimes when I saw my friends living carefree lives, but overall, I had a good childhood, despite losing mom. When I turned 16, my dad got me a car. The deal was simple: I'd pay for gas using my babysitting money, and he'd handle insurance and maintenance. It was a fair arrangement because I wasn't just driving around for fun. I had to get my younger sister and myself to school, do grocery shopping, run errands, and drive us both to sports practices and meets. My schedule was packed: school, home, grocery store, cooking when it was my turn, homework, practice, sleep, rinse and repeat. Weekends were for meets. I never went out partying or got into trouble. I was actually an honor student. Everything was going fine until my dad started dating this woman whose kids went to my high school. Let's just say she had some opinions about my car situation. One day, my dad called me into his office. He told me we needed to discuss the car situation. When I asked what he meant, he explained that if I wanted to keep using it, I'd need to take over the payments, maintenance, and insurance. I was shocked and asked him why things had to change. He mentioned that his girlfriend had pointed out how her kids were fully responsible for their own cars, and he thought it was only fair. When I told him I couldn't afford all that, he suggested I get a job. I explained that I barely had time with everything else on my plate, but he just said I'd have to figure it out. So I did exactly that. I handed him the keys right then and there. He looked confused and asked what I was doing. I explained that if those were the new terms, I didn't want the car anymore. He looked surprised but probably thought I'd cave in soon. He was wrong. The next morning, my sister and I missed the bus. I went to wake him up at 7 a.m. and told him we needed a ride to school. He asked why we weren't taking my car, and I reminded him that I'd given it back. He was furious but had to drive us. After school, we got a ride home from a friend. At 5:30, when dinner was usually ready, I was reading on the couch. My dad came home and asked where dinner was. I casually mentioned that I couldn't get to the store without a car but suggested he might find some leftovers in the fridge. He told me to walk to the store, but I explained that I couldn't because finals were coming up and I needed to study. I asked if he didn't care about my grades. An hour later, I reminded him we needed a ride to practice. He suggested asking friends, but I pointed out that no one from the team lived in our town and it would be really inconvenient for them. He had to drive us there and back, silently fuming the whole time. The next morning, surprise, we missed the bus again. I woke him up and he also discovered there was no orange juice for breakfast. That evening, same story. No dinner, another trip to the store, another ride to practice. Then I casually mentioned that the weekend's meet was an hour away and we needed to be there by 9 a.m. That was his breaking point. He called me upstairs and threw my car keys at me. He announced his new deal. He'd pay half the payment and half the insurance, and I could only use it for school, practice, meets, chores, and driving my sister. I threw the keys back, pointing out that was literally all I used it for anyway, and suggested he'd just sell it. 5 minutes later, he was screaming my name from downstairs and threw the keys up again, harder this time. He offered a new deal. He'd pay for everything except gas, but no personal use. I rejected that too, asking why I should pay to do chores with no benefits. I tossed the keys back down. Finally, he called me to the living room, trying to keep his cool. He presented his final offer. He'd pay for everything except gas. I could use the car whenever I wanted, and everything would go back to how it was before. I pointedly asked if he meant before his girlfriend got involved. He ignored that comment, but I could see it hit home. Later that night, I overheard them arguing in his study. His girlfriend was complaining that he was babying me, trying to compare me to her kids again. My dad shut her down, telling her that her kids didn't run an entire household and that the conversation was over. The next day, she gave me the coldest look when she came over, but I just smiled and waved. A week later, my dad mentioned they were taking a break. 2 weeks after that, he told me they had broken up. He reflected that sometimes people show their true colors when they try to mess with your kids. I just nodded and went to the grocery store. After all, we were out of orange juice. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.